All right, here we go. Happy Monday morning, everyone. Dave Van Auken Fight Finesse, my main guy, James Lynch. James, how you doing, brother?
Doing awesome. Just want to let people know I'm not John Morgan, even though I am wearing his shirt, apparently.
All right, we can, the podcast is the George Costanza moment. Have a good day, folks. Bye. See
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Leave on a high note. Leave on a high note.
Absolutely.
Speaking my language.
Man, UFC's been amazing. Some great events back to back at the Apex, some great stuff, but nothing like this. This UFC 259 is stacked. And I was like, okay, let me get James on. Let's talk 15, 20 minutes about it. Huge card, not even, of course, the three main events. We can break them down and talk about it. We don't have to pick a winner. And I kind of want to go more storylines of that central, but huge card. What's your first take when you see the poster and you see the lineup? You're like, oh, this is something big.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious is Adesanya and Blachowicz, just because it is very rare to have a champ go up and fight for a title when he's the current champ. I know Henry Cejudo's done it, but I just think there is sort of that intrigue factor. And, I was against this when this first happened because, I'm a merit guy. I thought like a Whitaker, Glover Teixeira should step in there as well. But, I am going to still watch. I'm going to enjoy it. I am intrigued to see how Adesanya does in a different weight class. I'm also intrigued that he's fighting a guy who seemingly gets counted out all the time in Jan Blachowicz. So, yeah, storyline wise, this has a bit of everything in terms of what the card's offering, and yeah, I can't wait. It's coming up very soon.
Love it. Great point. I saw that big fact. You probably saw it too, that Jan was an underdog 8 out of his last 9 fights, something of that nature. That's intriguing that you say that you were iffy on it. I loved it right away, and I'm a Glover guy. I've talked to Glover numerous times. I am a huge Glover Teixeira fan, and the momentum he had, I just think once in a while, especially in mixed martial arts, you get a superstar or you get a guy that the rocket can be on, and Izzy is that guy. And with the weight classes, and then there was stuff with Jones, to me, I liked it. I like this matchup a lot. I think they knew that this is a light heavyweight champion that I think that he can beat. I think the UFC is smart about it. I love it. I am a huge fan of this fight. The next two, it's funny that the next one, the female fight, Amanda's that great, and sometimes her fights get overlooked. And I'm almost, in a weird way, I'm hoping Megan does something outrageous that we can talk about. It's good for content. But then the fight, probably maybe the one on the card, the Jan versus Sterling, getting a ton of love. And then there's so much behind it with what Corey Sandhagen has done over the last 2 cards. So it's like, this is just so much to unpack. It's like we could have the biggest, superstar in the sport with Sterling. We could have the biggest upset of the year, or we could have the most dominant female champion ever. Then you might have the fight of the night or fight of the year candidate with Jan and Sterling. So much is here. That's I was like,
there is so much to dig into. I mean, I'll touch on a few things there that you mentioned. The Megan and Amanda fight is kind of flying under the radar because obviously, everyone's expecting Nunes to win, but I don't think people are looking at the implications of this, because if Nunes wins, where does the featherweight division go from here? I know they booked Felicia Spencer against Daniel Wolf yesterday, it was last week, I should say, but they it's one of those things where, the division does really hang in a balance here, because if Amanda wins, there is no clear-cut contender. She's beat everyone else. So what happens with the division going forward? I think that's very interesting. Amanda's also a parent now, so how is that going to change her outlook going forward when she, seemingly is running out of options here? I do find it interesting, at least at the time we're recording this, Valentina Shevchenko has not had a fight booked. I do wonder if that's an option where, they're holding her off. I believe they offered her the Andrade fight, and Andrade was like, no, I need more time. Maybe they're still doing that, but I do find it interesting. They haven't announced that fight yet. So I think it's interesting. The other thing I'll say about the fight is it's actually an interesting style matchup, because Megan's a striker, right? And what's one way you could potentially beat Amanda Nunes? It's knocking her out, right? We haven't seen anyone really test that chin outside of maybe a Cyborg, but she didn't even have a chance because she got blitzed in that first round. So I think Megan poses a much more interesting style matchup against Nunes than, say, Felicia Spencer did, because I think the chances we knew of Felicia getting into the ground and potentially working her ground game were not as good as I think of Megan potentially clipping Amanda Nunes. So I like that. I also like that Megan is a true featherweight. It's not a 135 or moving up. So that'll be interesting, because Megan's very big for the division. She is a true featherweight. So I think it's intriguing. And I think that's sort of getting lost in all this, which understandably there's so much going on. So that's sort of my thoughts on it. And I do think if Amanda wins, that could be the last of the division. And maybe, I don't know, because I don't know what you do. There's only a couple of fighters in it, right?
Right. I agree with you. So there's a lot there to unpack, and I kind of do want to hit on a couple more, and then maybe have you and I put like our dark horse fight on the card as well. But let's go back to the female. I love it there. It's tough because you would think the older Amanda gets, and like you said, with being a mom and being a parent, she might not want to do the 135 anymore. The 145 is where she might want to sit, but like you said, there's not a contender really there. Of course, Felicia and Wolf, it's intriguing, but how she dominated my good friend Felicia, I don't think they can do that anytime soon, right? It has to be a multiple win streak in a row. And you think Amanda is towards the end. It's just one of those things. It is really tough. And it's like, it's hard to even sell her fights anymore now. And I think it's weird that she always usually has been put in this, mega cards kind of a thing. And they kind of squeeze her in and another match. Because I would think I would rate the buzz, right? Izzy Jan is number 1. And I think the Sterling Jan number 2, the betting lines on it. Like I said, the future obligation to probably a Corey Sandhagen, and Peter going down to American Top Team, and Sterling, this fight's been pushed back. To me, it's got a lot of good storylines, and I definitely want to put some spotlight on it. But the Amanda Megan is just kind of underneath the radar. And it's like, and like I said, I love Amanda. Who doesn't love Amanda? Great person, nice person, all that. But it's like, I almost want to feel the upset. So at least now we can spark. Oh, do we do a rematch? If Felicia wins again, Felicia lost to Megan, it just can kind of really bulk up the roster a little bit. So I'm hoping there. But Jan and Sterling, let's jump all in on that. It seems like it is really 50-50. I talked to so many people about it. A lot of people love Sterling in this fight, the momentum and the submission game and the grapple. And Jan's never been there. And Jan's fought, Aldo and Faber, who, he didn't get a really, a hard lineup to get to the title match. But then it's just Jan's one of those guys that his stand-ups are beautiful, boxing's amazing, going down there to ATT to wrestle and grapple. I think Jan might even surprise people. I think he might be the guy out of this card. If Izzy wins 2 belts, he gets all the attention. But if Jan can defeat him, and I think Peter can beat Sterling, he kind of could be the guy that's like, whoa, we got ourselves a bantamweight, king.
I agree. There's a lot going into this. So I'm actually picking Sterling in this fight. And part of the reason is just the battle of, the body of work, I should say, in the octagon. I mean, Sterling's been a mainstay in the UFC for a very long time. He's fought better competition overall than than Jan has. And obviously Jan looked great in the Aldo fight. I mean, that was a fight where you could sort of see the tide turning and Jan was sort of taking over, whereas Sterling, I mean, I just can't ignore that quick win over Corey Sandhagen. Like I can. I know Sandhagen's got, a lot better. And obviously you don't get much better than 2 back-to-back finishes like he's had. But still, the fact that he finished him so quickly, that's the type of stuff where it's like, when you watch a fight like that, you're like, this is something special, right? It's not just a regular performance. And he's done that before. Like, look at Cody Stamann. He, dominated him. He's dominated so many fighters. That's where I see a difference. And, I do think it's interesting with Jan going to ATT, but let's be honest, the reason that's happening is because of the pandemic in Thailand. So he can't go and train at his typical camp at Tiger Muay Thai. So that almost, it could help him. It might work against him though, right? Like,
I think it's a negative.
Yeah.
I think it's a negative. If you're going to make the biggest dinner of your life, when you want to make it in your kitchen and be used to your supply to everything. This is the biggest test of his MMA career, the biggest fight of his career, and he's not used to the things that he's used to. And I know, American Top Team is an amazing gym. I even see a little resurgence. I've talked to a couple people down there. They feel they had a rough 2020 with people leaving and coaches in and out and a couple fighters in and out. It feels like they have a good momentum. It feels like they're back and they're ready for a big 2021. But I don't know. I think I'm with you with Sterling, but it's one of those things. It's like until I feel like we've seen Sterling lose in the octagon, and we just haven't seen that with Jan. So sometimes it's hard to go against those guys. It's kind of been, the rule. Everyone was so high on Gaethje with Khabib, and I'm like, I never saw that yet. I'm going still with Khabib until I see the man lose inside the cage. It's kind of hard to go against him. 2 fights I really want to hit on real quick. How about Santos and Rakic? I love that fight. That's just like, that could easily be a UFC Fight Night main event. Love that fight a lot. I would love your 2 cents on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you bet on fights. I did see you won some money on Derek Lewis. So I think there's plenty of value on Thiago Santos in this fight. Like, I don't get him being the underdog here because I think people forget that Glover Teixeira fight, he was looking good early on. It's just he's fighting Glover Teixeira. No one can knock this guy out and take him out. And Rakic, I think he's looked outstanding. I had a chance to speak with him before this fight. Obviously, he's very ready and very motivated. But I think Santos is his body of work overall, kind of like with Sterling. You've seen what he's done. He's got a knockout win over the current champ. I don't think you can look past that. And yes, he's getting older. And yes, he's had the long layoff after the Jones fight. But I just think we've seen more to Thiago Santos. And I think he can go out there and potentially finish a Rakic in this fight. And I think him being an underdog is very interesting because I just don't know what Rakic has done. Like, that was a great win over Anthony Smith in his last fight. He certainly showed that he can dominate, top light heavyweights here, but he also didn't finish Smith. And I feel like there was an area where he could have done that. Whereas Santos, you see him not do that. He goes in for the kill. And yes, it didn't work out against Glover, but a lot of people can't finish Glover. Like I said, if you look at his last couple of fights, Glover's a tough guy to put out. So I think Santos pulls this off as the underdog. I like him a lot here. And I think it's a case of, yes, Rakic is absolutely the future of this division, but I don't think it's now against a guy like Thiago Santos.
Love it. I love it. I'm 100% on that as well. There's always a thing with football, and you maybe go to hockey. When a guy like Torres is ACL, he's never back the first year. It's almost another year to get back. That was Santos's first fight in the cage in a long time after thing. And, and let's just be honest, a couple different referees maybe would have stopped it in a couple different moments of Glover. Exactly. So if Santos defeats Glover with a TKO via second round, this is the line's totally way off guard here. I like Santos a lot in this fight too. I just see a stoppage with Santos, and I don't see it with Rakic. Yeah, he can win 15 minutes. It's not a 25, and that might be better for, I think, Santos, because I think he can go all out. He can, hey, I'm going all up for 8 minutes, and if I can need to conserve energy for the last couple, I will. How about in the lightweight division, Dober and Islam? He's just maybe the hottest or the most talked about prospect, one loss underneath the belt. Everyone thinks he's the next title guy. He's the next guy after Habib. I agree. You sometimes don't think I'll outthink the room. I think this is a good fight for him. I love how Dober stepped up. Drew's a tough guy as well, but I am leaning towards Islam.
Yeah, I think Islam absolutely should be the favorite here. I mean, grappling advantage clearly, but I do wonder, is this a spot where we're overlooking Dober because he does have that knockout power? You saw what he did to Alex Hernandez, and I know Hernandez is maybe not on the level of an Islam Makhachev, but I do think if the fight stays standing, it could get very interesting. But Makhachev, like I said, he's bringing something different. This is sort of the first notable opponent he's had. That's sort of been the knock on Makhachev, right? I mean, I've been hearing for years how this guy's going to be the next Habib, but he just kind of like Zabit in a way. He just hasn't fought the competition to really put him over the hump. This is a good start. Drew Dober's a legit guy. If anything, I think he's a bit of a dark horse in that division. I do wonder, though, if the fight stays standing, how will that go? You got to imagine Dober's working on his wrestling and his grappling with a guy like Gaethje, who he gets to train with every day. That's got to help him a little bit. But, saying that, Gaethje lost to Habib. So maybe they sort of have the recipe there. So I'm going to take Makhachev, but I think if you're going to bet this fight, I don't think it's worth, close to 4-1 is what I'm looking at in some of the lines here. I think that's a little too steep with Dober's knockout power, with Dober's, improvement over the last couple fights. I think he's absolutely a live dog here. So the pick's going to be Makhachev, but if you're looking for value in this fight, I think Dober has a shot for sure.
Like that. We'll hit one more, then we'll go back to those triple main events and maybe a storyline that will come out of it. Definitely the dark horse fight of this card. Easily, again, could be the main event of a fight night. Dominic Cruz, just a legend in the sport, done it all. Casey Kenny, the biggest test of his career. It's usually, I love these fights. It's the passing of the torch, or it's the old guard saying, no, not just yet. I'm a huge fan of this fight. On the prelims, crazy. Dominic Cruz on a prelim. Never thought I would hear that, right? But I would love your, Dom, do you think he holds off a young upstart?
Yeah, I think. Well, sorry. Yeah, as in I'm going with Casey Kenny here.
Really?
Yeah, I think momentum is going to change things a little bit here. I think with Kenny being a little bit more active, we saw the thing with Casey Kenny is those last couple of fights, he dominated those opponents. And I know they're not on Dom Cruz level. And look, it's very easy for me to think that Cruz could go out there, have a very tactical game plan. And we'll be talking about on Monday about how, Casey Kenny got, rushed too fast and it was too much of a step up. We've seen that, right? Edmund Shabazian against Derek Brunson. Macy Barber against Roxanne Modafferi. We've seen that, but I think with Kenny, he's kind of catching Cruz at a good time where Cruz has had layoffs. He's I think people have figured him out. I actually just talked to his teammate Kyler Phillips recently. He's sort of mentioned the same thing, that I think people are figuring out how Dom Cruz sort of operates. And, you've got a guy in Kenny who I think is just coming in at the right time. I think Kenny can pull this one off. If Dom goes out there and wins a decision, will it shock me? Absolutely not. But I think at some point, Cruz, even though he just lost to Cejudo, I think the gas has got to come off the pedal a little bit. And I think Kenny's the guy catching him at a good time. Because look at this. Kenny has nothing to lose here. He loses this fight, he'll live to see another day. If Cruz loses, his days as a title challenger are over, I think, because it's really tough to come back from that type of losing streak. So even from that perspective, I think Kenny, just with his pressure, his wrestling, a lot of different things, I think Kenny has the ability to win this. And I might be wrong, like I said on Monday, but I don't know. I got to go with momentum here. I'm going to go with the younger guy, Casey Kenny.
Great point. And we've been agreeing so much. So this is a good part, a good debate. I love Dom in this fight here. There's just, and usually I'm a momentum guy as well. I love how Kenny's fought more and won more. He's got more green lines on the Topology side. I like that a lot. There's something about that in mixed martial arts and confidence and all of that. I just think Dom Cruz is just on a whole other level. He lost to Cejudo, who you can argue in those lighter weight divisions might be the greatest of all time in those 25, 35s. So nothing off of that. And with the whole referee thing, I think there's something there. I think Dominic Cruz knows what you just said. If he loses this is kind of done for him. This is kind of done as a, he's on the prelims too. I bet you he's a little, let's just be honest, pissed off about it. I bet you there's a little slight towards it, and put him to Kenny. I think Dom, there's just some guys who've been around for so long, and I think he needs a little chip on the shoulder, and he has it now. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see a 2-3 fight win streak with Dominic Cruz in 2021. And who knows, maybe a title contention guy in 2022 and one last hurrah. But UFC 259 stacked. Appreciate your time, James. Like always, your content's insane. It's definitely we'll hit that at the end. 3 title fights. If you had to pick one of the underdogs, and I know you said Sterling right away, but if it's one guy or a girl you're like people are not paying more attention to, or something, a huge storyline out of these 3 fights, I would love, just something, a little nugget there out of those 3 big title fights.
Well, I think a couple things. I think the one thing we got to look at, and knock on wood, I'm not trying to jinx anything, but Glover Teixeira is the backup of this fight. I am curious if it's Jan who for some reason can't go. Are they still going to go ahead with the fight between Glover and Izzy? I would think they would, because it really doesn't impact Izzy at all. Would it be for an interim title? I don't know how they'd negotiate that or figure it out, but that's, I think, something that's kind of getting lost here, is that Glover is the backup, and rightfully so. I mean, I've been on the Glover train. I think he had a great moment last year where he beats Thiago Santos. Here's a guy who a lot of people counted out. He's in his 40s, and here he is, in a potential title shot. So I think that's something that's getting overlooked. But how about the fact that Jan's the underdog in this fight? And I get it. I mean, this is a guy continuously getting counted out, but how about the fact that Adesanya, who hasn't even fought in the weight class, yes, he's undefeated, is the favorite here. So I think that's another thing that's kind of interesting about this fight. And like I said, I think Jan, out of asking about all the title fights, if there could be an upset, I think it could be Jan knocking out Adesanya. You never know, right? This is a guy that we've counted out time and time again. I could see it repeating here, but I mean, I got to go Izzy just because it's Izzy, right? You can't go against him.
Right. The thing I talked about earlier, I've never seen him lost in the octagon, and I'm just going to keep on rolling that out. Yeah, moving up weight classes, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And Jan just has that Polish power. They've talked about it. Real quick, if you got 2 more minutes, I would love to run another little thing by you.
Let's do it.
You mentioned the backup word. Watching a couple of the last cards, and I love pushing, promoting, helping people, all that. And anyone that knows me knows that. There's just some fighters, I believe, that are fighting right now in the UFC that maybe should not be there.
100%. Totally agree with you there.
Okay.
Yeah, we're on the same page here.
I feel they should cut the fat a little bit, 10, 15, 20%. And I'm a violent Bob Ross guy. We've had him on the show all the time. And I feel so bad for him. He went through the suspension, and then to get a fight and all that, and then not fight on fight day. What happened if they did, especially in this pandemic era, but just even all the time, future shit happens, weight cuts, all this stuff. They should have cut 15% of the roster and have backups. They should have a 135 backup that, a flyweight could move up to 132 and fight. They should have a 155 that could cut weight, could go female one in whatever weight class. If they got 2 lightweights, make 1 lightweight. They should have 4 to 6 guys. You cut the roster. These LFA icon guys, UFC Titan FC guys, you pay these guys $2,000. You let them go underneath the banner. You let them take a picture. You let them make the weight. And that's game-changing money for people like that who's never been in the UFC. I think they should really cut down the roster. When you have a chance to attract people, mainstream people, and then you start the card, and a couple of these first fights on the card are like, this isn't what the UFC is about. And then you get to the main card and studs like what Casey O'Neill did, and then I'm all for it. But it's like, I think they should trim the fat and do a lot more backup fighters to make sure Violent Bob Ross fights on that night.
I half agree with you there. I'm with you on cutting the fat. And I think Contender Series, as great as it's been, I think in a lot of cases, fighters are rushed too much, because once they get signed, in some cases, they have to learn on the job. Look at Chase Hooper. And I know he was a developmental deal initially, and then they gave him a couple fights, and then he got in. But you remember that fight against Alex Caceres? He did not look UFC caliber in that fight. I mean, right. he didn't even look UFC caliber against Barrett. It was just Barrett made a mistake, and he happened to capitalize on it. And I love Chase Hooper. If you're watching this, man, I'm a big fan. But I just think that's the problem, is that some of these fighters are getting rushed into that spotlight. So I agree. They need to cut the fat. Here's the problem, though, David, is that they have so many cards that they have to do for ESPN. It's contracted. That's why, they can go a year without John Jones fighting, during the pandemic, or they can have a Connor not fight after that, because they still have to put on these cards. So to them, it doesn't matter. And that's kind of going opposite of what you're saying on the second point. Yes, it'd be great to see Violent Bob Ross fight, but I don't think the average fan cares, to be honest. I mean, Violent Bob Ross does, but I think they're just unless it's a notable fight where you're seriously crap, this really impacts a card, it doesn't matter. It's a numbers game. And that's why they don't have a problem signing someone on short notice that might not be UFC caliber, because it's just filling up the void that they need to fill. Because at the end of the day, all ESPN looks at is, hey, are the headliners there? Are the big names there on the card? Yep. Okay, the rest of the card doesn't matter, because that's why they had so many fights on that card. I'm positive, at UFC Vegas 19 was because of the fact they knew probably some of those were going to fall out, and it still would work TV wise. So I'm with you there. I just don't know the logistics of how it would work if you'd have all these backup fighters. And plus, like, let's say it's a notable fighter that's fighting. Do you really want to fight a newcomer on 24 hours notice when you've built up all this momentum? Like, it's tough, right? So I agree. Like, it'd be great to see these guys fight, not have to be on the sidelines, but I think it's a little bit tough. But I am with you on the, caliber of what it means to be a UFC fighter. That has gone down drastically over the last, say, 6 years, when the UFC really sort of made the cards basically a sausage factory. I miss the days when we have one pay-per-view a month, couple fight cards, and there was an anticipation. I have to catch my breath because we just had a card last week and we got another one coming up. So it's like, that's my thoughts on it. But I agree with you on the roster thing.
Totally agree. So great point. Great take back. I guess it's just, Violent Bob Ross I just used, but we just used Casey Kenny. Imagine if something happens with Dom, 2 days before, and, Casey Kenny's building the momentum. He's building, the career and the tapology and the green side of the bar. I just feel like if he had a 135 or a 145, it's still kind of go to work with. And, of course, he would be a huge favorite. It is a guy who's borderline UFC guy, and it's, not giving him just to win. It's MMA, mixed martial arts stuff happens, and some of these guys are studs. Some of them are on the rise. But no, it's a good point. Good comeback. I get it. So you're not a fan? I used to be a fan too of give me one show a month. But now the more and more I see it each week, I'm starting to really, really love the week by week by week. And when it's off a week, or especially 2 weeks, I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, what's going on? I'm a huge fan of each week now. I've kind of turned that corner, I think.
Yeah, it's tough. I guess for me, because I'm on the West Coast, a little bit different. So the cards actually start like in the afternoon, which most people like. I'm thankful when the card's over, before midnight, like I was dealing with when I used to live in Toronto. But at the same time, like I got stuff to do. You're a dad like I am, so it's difficult to like, get dinner ready or do the bath when you got to do that. So what my strategy has been, and it's worked out pretty well for the most part, is I'll PVR the undercard. I'll watch it as there's breaks in between fights and catch up by the time I get to the main card. So it kind of works out that way. But what I had happen last week, and here in Canada at TSN, they had golf on for some reason, and they were like, oh, just go to the website and watch it there. Well, you can't PVR that. So I ended up having to watch a lot of the undercard fights the next day, which is a bummer, but that's a rarity. Usually I just PVR, but that's why, like, sometimes you need it a little bit to catch your breath because there's just so many fighters. It's tough to keep track of everything. Plus the regional stuff. I know you do that as well. You do bare knuckle. Like, it's a lot to consume. So I think it's nice to space things out a little bit, but that's just me.
It is. I think our diamond shoes are too tight, James. You know what I mean? It's like all this MMA content I got to watch and cover. Oh no.
Yeah, no, it can be a bit overwhelming, but you got to space it out a little bit.
Absolutely. UFC 259, guys, Saturday night, a stack card, ESPN Plus. Make sure to order the pay-per-view. So I think we're both on Izzy. We're both on Amanda. We're hoping maybe something crazy happens to those two. That would be fun to watch and fun to kind of cover. But I think you and me, the fight that we're off, I think I'm leaning Jan. I think I'm going to go with Peter Jan to defeat Sterling. I've never seen him lose, so I think I'm going to stick with it. Looks like you're all in with Aljamain Sterling, and maybe a Sterling Corey Sandhagen rematch in the future.
We'll see. Yeah, or TJ Dillashaw, but that's a podcast in its own.
I know we that's another 30 minutes for another day. James, man, appreciate you and your time. Oh, please shout out websites, at Lynch Sports, YouTube, everything.
It's all, I keep it simple. At Lynch on Sports, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. That's where I put all my interviews. I work for a lot of outlets. So it's just easier to put them in the playlist on the channel. More importantly, thanks for having me on, man. This is always fun.
Hey, appreciate it. Anytime you want, I'm always game. I think we can talk for hours, mixed martial arts. I appreciate you like always, man. Have a good day. We'll talk to you soon.
You too, buddy. Thanks so much.